Hello everyone, it's Amy and welcome back to week 77 of the new Build Your Stash and Craft. Today we are going to make large background stencils, and to do that we picked up some of the deco mesh and I picked up some of this kind of lacy fiber kind of ribbon or whatever you would call it from the dollar store. Lace itself would work if it has some nice big holes in it. We purchased some of the rug, non-slip rug fabric. And I even have an onion bag here, any type of a mesh bag, onions, apples, whatever you may get, some kind of vegetable in a mesh bag. That works great. So, and then we're going to need our knife and our metal ruler, our cutting pad, and some cardboard, large pieces of cardboard. This is part of a pizza box, and so you need 2 pieces of cardboard for each stencil. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn the cardboard into a frame. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to mark on here 1 inch. Sorry, I didn't grab out a pencil ahead of time. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use my little mat to do it. And I'm going to cut them both at the same time, so I just have them stacked on top of each other. But let's see. Whoops, that wouldn't be 1 inch. Put this over here. Put a mark at 1 inch. And then put this over here and put a mark at 1 inch. And we're just going to mark it all the way around so that we can cut a 1 inch frame all the way around the cardboard to hold our mesh. And that way we've got a nice solid stencil that will last a long time. You can just hold these things down and use them as stencils. That's not 1 inch, right? Did you notice that? Look at that. That's quite a long ways. Move it over. But yeah, the frame just helps it really stay nice and sturdy. It also helps keep it flat when you're using it as a stencil. And so for me, I like to have the frame around. And it's easy to store. You can just throw it into a file folder. I always keep my stencils individually in a file folder or between 2 pieces of paper that I just tape together to make a file folder. Whoops, I need this. And that is how I that's how I store my stencils. So what we're going to do now is, I guess I'll draw a line so that I know where to start and stop. Because I just want to make sure that I don't cut all the way across my cardboard, which I might do if I wasn't paying attention, just like I just marked it wrong. And if these are off a little bit, it's not a big deal. They don't have to be 1 inch. I could have just made them as wide as the ruler and just line the ruler up with the edge and cut it that way. I wanted to have a little bit extra. I wanted a little bit bigger space, so I didn't want to make my frame that wide. But I could have, in the last one here. And then also what you can do is once you cut these, and like I said, I cut them together. And I'm just going to cut so that I leave that 1 inch on each side. And I cut them together just so that I know that they will pretty much be kind of exactly the same. When you separate these 2 pieces here, that's what holds your blade from sliding in and out. And when you want to move your blade, you put them together, and then you can move your blade either way. And then when it's where you want it, then just separate the 2, and that's what stops the blade from moving while you're cutting. So I'm going to line the ruler up here and just cut from that 1 inch mark down to this 1 inch mark. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm going to make a few slices because I want it to go as far as through both pieces. And then I'm going to turn it because it won't fit across my pad this way. If you have a bigger pad, you don't have to turn it. But this is just easier for me. But if you have a bigger pad, you could just turn the whole pad. Always make sure that when you're using an X-Acto knife, don't pull it right towards. I am standing up, and I'm standing just off to the side a little bit, so that if I were to slip, I would not cut myself. Always be very careful whenever you're using any type of a sharp knife. My husband has a few sharp knives in the kitchen I'm not even allowed to touch, because I tend to be a little bit of a klutz when it comes to knives. But the older I get, the better I get. And one more time, and we will have our frame. Now, you'll just cut a frame for any different type of stencil that you want to make. And if you're in the mood for just cutting frames, you can just continue to, cut a bunch of frames. Just keep your two pieces together. Paper clip them together or tape them together, because we're going to tape them together anyways. Okay, so let me just cut any little extra bits here that are not cut through. And there's one more here. Okay, now we have our frame. We also have this piece of cardboard, which would make another pretty nice stencil. It's not going to be as big as that one, but this one actually is the center of another one that I cut out. So once you get your frame cut out, then you're going to glue in whatever your stencil pattern is. So I glue them cardboard side to cardboard side. The messy, whatever you want to call it, the part that has pictures on it is on the outside, because this is shiny and it doesn't glue real well together, and it's gluing through whatever we're going to glue on there. So you really want it to have a really nice grip. If you don't like the looks of this, then you can put them shiny side to shiny side, but if you're going to do that, you need to sand all of the shiny sides so that the glue will stick better. Like I said, I do it this way because I want to know that it is stuck well, and then I don't have to bother sanding it, because that's my most unfavorite thing to do. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use some of our masking tape and tape across the top edge, just to kind of hold it together. I was trying to look. Sometimes I do this and sometimes I don't. Looks like the ones that I have as my samples, I did not do this with. I'm just going to put a couple pieces of tape on here. Just like this. There we go. Okay, and now we're going to put our stencil fabric, whatever that may be, right in the center. Now, the easiest way to do that is to just use an old brush. Use one of your brushes that we have for our stash. But make sure that you get it in water as soon as you're done. Now, I'm going to do the onion bag, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off the top and cut off the bottom. And then I usually just rip a hole in the bag when I get it home. So I'm going to cut it there where I ripped that hole, so that I can open it up and hopefully have enough to cover. this whole bit, and there is plenty. I could do this 2 layers thick or 1 layer thick. I'm going to do this one just 1 layer thick because I like that. And because this is so stretchy, I think I'm going to use a little bit of masking tape on this also. So the first thing I'm going to do is kind of cut it straight. Let's see here. I'm going to just kind of cut it what I would consider straight right here. It's really, really bunched up here. Oh yeah, you can just stretch that out. Okay. Let's kind of get it stretched and so that it's a little bit flat. There we go. All right, so I'm going to cut here first. I do normally make it just a little bit thinner than the frame. So the frame is 1 inch, so I want this to stick over or into the frame about a 1/2 inch with about a 1/2 inch of cardboard left on the outside edge. And that way that gives the cardboard even a better grip when you're gluing it together, because it'll be cardboard to cardboard with the glue without anything in between it. So, and now we still have all of this that we can make other. You can make smaller ones. You can leave it like that and use it on your jelly plate. You can use this on your jelly plate, but it will have this frame edge on it. I'll put this. Okay. And then once you get this all cut, then it's just a matter of gluing the frame together. I need to make sure that I have this. I'm going to flip this over because it's easier for me to cut over here. So that looks like I've got plenty on the edges. But I need to cut off this little bit right here. Now you can be super picky with it and try and make all of this perfectly straight and that type of thing. I don't normally mind too much whether these are all perfectly straight or whether they kind of have a little bit of movement to them, because it all looks good, you know, no matter which way you have it. So, and then we're just going to take our glue and put it around. And it's easiest for me so that I don't have it all over my hands. I prefer to spread it with a paintbrush or with a spreader, which a spreader can just be a credit card, or something, you know, like obviously a old credit card or a room key, or, you know, old debit card, or old, you know, any kind of old plastic card that you have, or whatever you use to spread paint and glue. So we're just going to get this all the way around, and then we do have to do the other side also. Now this is tacky glue, so it doesn't dry super fast. And so I'm going to do both sides before I try putting the netting down, because if I put the net on here right this second and then I'm bothering with the other, the net may move. And so I might as well just do it once by doing it after I get both sides glued. Get that out of there. And you do want to make sure that you have enough glue here so that when you press them together, it does make a little bit of contact, the glue does, through the stencil portion. And thick parts like the rug, the non-slip rug, that's really thick, so obviously your cardboard's not going to touch on both sides with that in there, but you'll want to make sure that you get your edges well and that you get the whole thing good, because even though it may not glue the cardboard to the cardboard because it's too thick for the cardboard to touch, it's gluing the frame to the non-stick rug fabric, and so that's not going to move. And then having the extra around the edges where the cardboard can touch each side all the way around, that will hold the stencil together. So, and this is just so easy, and it's just fun to play with. So there we go. I'm going to stick that in water right this second. Give it a little bit of a swish to get that water kind of moving in there. Make sure we clean it when we're done. So then we're just going to take this fabric and press it on here. Just want to make sure that I have it touching all the way around. Sometimes you may find that you get it glued together and there is a spot where it's right on the edge and you thought you had it between the two. It normally will stay just fine that way. You'll be able to use it just fine. And if you can't, you can put a little bit of masking tape on the outside wherever that loose spot may be. And just put it straight across down about this far if there's a gap there where it's not between the two cardboards. So there we go. Now we're just going to take this and press it down. Okay, and then you can squish it together with clamps all the way around, or use some of your parchment paper and a big heavy book and just put it between the parchment paper and a heavy book. Dropped it. Okay, sorry that took me so long. I just couldn't get it in there. So I just have a big atlas here that has parchment paper in it already, and I use it over and over. So here are some more pieces that I have that I can make stencils out of, and these again are the centers of some that I have already made. So now I'm going to show you what I made, because they do have to go in the book and they do have to dry. So we're going to play with some that I've already made. So like here is the deco mesh, and so that would be, this is the cardboard that came out of the center there. So I have this one. Now I've cut this out. Now I can cut a frame out of this one and have another one. And then, you know, you can go down as far as you feel like the sizes that you want. Just like I have this one here, which we just took out of the center of the onion bag. And the center of the onion bag came out of here. So I wound up with this, with the rug mesh. Then I have the next size down. I made the, we just made the onion bag out of. And then we could use this one right here to do another one. So, and then that one's going to be cut out, so maybe we could even do another one, or just have some nice sized pieces of nice small pieces of cardboard to play with. So this is the deco mesh, and I have already tried these after they dried. And here is the lacy kind of mixed media fabric from the Dollar Tree, which I think looks really awesome. And so this one, when I put it in there, I just put it in right on the edge there and right on the edge over there, and it just fit. It just comes together in the middle. So it doesn't overlap or anything, which you want to line them up in the center so that they're touching, but not really overlapping, or it will leave a line in the center of your stencil when you're stenciling if they overlap. So you do want to, you can get them in there nicely and everything, and then trim them down if you have to, if they're overlapping. And, you know, and it makes a darker, actually it would make a lighter line because the paint would not get through it as much. Wherever it's overlapping, there'd be twice as much fabric there. So, so let's see. So we have those two, those three, and the onion netting we're not going to be able to test today because it will be too dry. But, and then I have one other that if you don't have any of this netting, you can still make your own large background stencil just with a piece of paper. Just cut out a regular piece of paper, and the way that I folded this, because I wanted it to be long and not square, because normally when you fold a snowflake, you fold it in, you fold it so that you have a square. But I didn't want a square. I wanted a rectangle. So I just went ahead and, how did I fold it? I think I folded it like this. And then I just kind of folded it back. And folded it back this way. And whenever you're cutting stencils, you mostly cut on the folds, and always make sure that you don't totally cut a fold off. And then I folded it like this, and like this, and I believe that that's how I folded it. And then I just went in and just made my cuts. And remember what I just said, don't cut off your fold. There's a fold there. So we're going to go into that fold, but we want to make sure that we don't cut it off completely. Always start from one spot and go back to basically that same area to get a shape, remembering that your shapes will double when you open it up, and that you're going to have a place to glue it around the edges so you don't have to get super close to the edges. And so then what I can do also is, because I can't get to this area here, but that will be part of our opened up paper, take this and cut the fold this way. And this is just a very quick way to do it, but you can try all different types of shapes. Even make yourself a little notebook of shapes that you like, so that if you want to make a snowflake again, you'll know how to do that and make shapes you like. Now I'm making very large shapes to get into the middle. You don't want to leave a big blank piece of paper out here, because when you open up your stencil, that area will just be a large piece of paper. So now I'm going to look at it a little bit. I'm going to open it up and see I need something in this area, so that's on this fold right here. So I'm just going to and get into this area here where there's nothing, because again, that will just be a large area of white solid paper that you won't be able to stencil through. But here we go. So when we unfold this, can't really see it that well, but that's what it's, there is the gist of it. So you might want to come in from here a little bit, and there's just all different sorts of things you can do. You just play with it until you get it how you like it, and then remembering that it's going to have a frame around it, so you'll only have a certain amount of it that is going to show as your stencil. But so that is how you can make your own. And then I have already, because it was still wet, I did blue on one side, and then I did some yellow on the other because the blue was still wet or damp, and I didn't want them to mix on my sponge. So, but the more that you use this, the more sturdy it will become. Now, after this was really, really damp on both sides, because it was paper, I stuck this back in my parchment, back in my atlas, and let it just, I let it sit and dry for a bit till it was just not really tacky too much. And then I stuck it in my book. That flattened it out really nicely, because it was a little bit warped from being so wet, and it's just a piece of copy paper. But the more that you use it, acrylic paint is plastic, so it will become very plasticized. So long as you take care of it, it's going to get, every time you use it, it will get stronger and stronger every time. You would think that it would get worse, but it doesn't. So that's how you make the background stencils, and then we'll just kind of see what they look like. And the thing is, you don't have to, like this one, is really pretty, and I might want to do the whole thing, but you don't have to. You can just do parts and pieces of them. And you do need the sponges that we bought. Now, I like these sponges because we were doing large background stencils. I wanted large sponges, but also I wanted like something I didn't have to make a handle for. So when you get the kind that have this heavy scrubby on the back, that makes it nice and solid to hold on to right there. And so you don't have to have anything special. You can glue some cardboard or a piece of wood or whatever on there and then just wash them. But I find that this works really well. It also makes it really easy to clean them when I'm done. So then you're going to need a fancy paint palette. You know, I have a few of those. Save those whenever you can. You can use either, this is where the groove is, so usually I will use this side because it doesn't have that where my paint can get down in that valley. And so I'm just going to put some paint on there. Now, because this is so big and it's going to be a background, I might want it to be light. This isn't super thin, so I don't want to thin it down too much, but I might want to give it a couple sprays. But if your acrylic paint is really, really is quite thick, because sometimes it gets quite thick, just go ahead and put a few more sprays of water in there. So I am just going to kind of mix it on my sponge because I have a large area to do, so it's okay that I put a lot of it on my sponge. And then we're just going to, just like any other stencil, we're just going to tap. Whenever you're using a stencil, straight up and down. Don't do this. And don't rub it in any way, shape, or form because you will rub that paint right underneath your stencil. Unless you have a stencil that has glue on the back, sticky glue, no matter what, when you do any kind of rubbing, you are going to get paint underneath. If your paint is too thick on your sponge, like we started here, so we'll see if I had a thick area right there or not. Just going to pick up the rest of this paint. But that wasn't a ton of paint. And that paint and a little bit of water is going to give us a really nice background. So it looks pretty good to me. Now, I have not made sure that this is perfect. I've not made sure that the paint itself is completely solid in every little area. And that's okay because that's the way I like my backgrounds. I don't want it to be super solid. Like I like to have, with any stenciling, I like to have a little bit of tone to the paint. So this is where I started, and it did not seep underneath. So I did make sure, you know, I did have this pressed well enough. Now the paint does come through here a little bit, so you might want to wear your gloves. But there's what that looks like. And, you know, when I was talking about like the paint like here, you can see a little of the white behind, and that's the way I like the paint to look when I'm stenciling. I want that little bit of like two-tone to it, but I really like the way it looks. And if you want to make it more, you can just move your stencil over and then just continue going. You can put your stencil down here, just kind of line it up and go this way if you want to fill the whole page. But I think that looks nice, and I'm going to keep that just like that because I really like the way that that one turned out. So that is what a paper stencil looks like. And again, I will probably still stick this in my atlas. When it's dried up a little bit, I'll stick it in my atlas to flatten it back out again. Grab some more paper here, and we'll see what the decoupage looks like. And this is pretty much about trying to see if my, yep, that's about as tall as my paper. So I can just put my paper right to the edge there. And then let's do that one in, let's do it in green, because I really like the green also. And I'm not going to bother cleaning my plate. You can. So it may have a little blue in it. And actually, I think what I might do, well, I'll start with the other end. I might use the other blue part right along with it because that would look really pretty. So I'll start with the green. Okay, now wherever I'm pushing really hard, because I didn't really mix that in really well, I should have really kind of got it kind of really smoothed in there. And be careful to press, not press too hard in one area. You get these big blotches sometimes. And this is a really thin stencil. So is the paper though. So I think the green just did not didn't soak into my sponge quite the same way, but it may be the stencil or just the way that I'm pressing right now, because I'm getting a lot of very dark spots, and I really shouldn't necessarily get that. If I had my paint smoothed out well and I didn't press too hard, you need to be patient whenever you're doing different things. Take your time, do it relaxing, be very relaxed when you're doing it. I'm real heavy-handed, and so that doesn't help any. But see, yep, I pressed really hard in that one spot and wound up with a big old blue mark. So I'm just going to tap down here and we'll see what we get. Because what I'm seeing is I don't really see much through it. And maybe I'm just not seeing it. Straight up and down and not pushing super hard. And let's see if we get that netting look or not. Yeah, we did. So see, there's the netting look. Not pushing too hard, being a little lighter. And then here's where I was just a little too heavy-handed. So the netting part looks good, but the big blotches, they're all right and not all right. But they'll work great for backgrounds, and that's the whole point of the big, large background stencils, is being able to do a large area at one time. So now we'll do this one. And we'll do this one in, let's do it in yellow. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and put it on my palette without wiping it off, because it's not a color that's going to make mud. Oops, that's quite a bit of paint. It's a little bit of water. And really get that worked into your sponge. Make sure that you don't have any great big dark spots that are just paint sitting on top of your sponge. You want it kind of worked into the sponge. Alrighty. And then again, try not to be too heavy-handed. Straight up and down. And this is the one I need to be careful in the center, because in the center there is, it's not connected. Straight up and down with no rubbing. And rubbing with this type of a stencil also, can really mess up your stencil, which is another reason to not rub. You have a heavy plastic stencil, rubbing it is not going to hurt the stencil, but it is going to hurt your image when you pick your stencil up, because you will have areas where the paint has been pushed underneath of it. And when you're spraying a stencil, spray from up just a little ways. Don't get too close to the stencil. So you want that spray to kind of hit as a wider, drier mist instead of a really more solid, watery color, where that's going to seep underneath your stencil. Okay, so let's see what that one looks like. Ooh, that's really cool. And that one has an animal print to it. So I like that one too. And then we have our really large background stamp, which is our rug fabric. And so the one thing that you can do, we'll use what we've got left of the yellow. The nice thing when you're trying to make backgrounds is you don't necessarily need to have a solid background. Having the white paper on the white background is not necessarily the smartest thing, but you can go ahead and just do parts of your stencil in the background, and that really makes for a very nice looking background instead of having it be solid. It's very nice to just kind of have it mixed here and there in just different shapes, not necessarily like in a square or a circle or anything, just you know, put some on there. Like that. Now we can see here it looks better. Here I pressed quite hard. And I kind of pressed quite hard because it feels like I should because it's so thick. But maybe if I didn't press as hard, because I don't really care for that going underneath. And that is a matter of if your paint is too wet or you press too hard with kind of a liquidy type paint, it's going to get underneath your stencil. Otherwise, it shouldn't really get under your stencil if you have a drier paint and don't push super hard. Just see if I can get some of this green to come off. And because the green is super dry, there's hardly nothing left. I am pressing fairly hard. We'll see if that makes a difference. And again, up and down. Maybe when I did the yellow, maybe I moved it. I don't think so. I think my paint was just too wet and it seeped under the stencil. And so that's all a matter of just playing around with things and getting them. That was much better. See, with the much drier sponge, the blue and the green turned out much better than the yellow with the wet sponge. So that's something I'll have to remember. Because I pressed harder to get through these holes, my wetter paint really ran because I squished the sponge so hard. But I like the way that that looks too. And maybe I don't care for the yellow much, but I really do like the way that the blue and the green turned out. So I'll have to remember, very dry sponge with that stencil. And you put them in you can literally just take a couple pieces of paper. Now for this one, because it's so big, I might do 2 pieces of paper or 3 like this. So make my own divider, because stencils like to stick to each other and and get caught on each other and that type of thing. Now these background stencils with the edges, not so much, but if you did a very lacy one, then it would. Like this one even, in these lacier parts, it might get caught on another stencil that had parts like this too. So it's nice to just have them in their own little folder. So you could do like this with one more piece of paper on the back here. And maybe cardstock would be better than regular copy paper, but the copy paper would be fine also because you're just going to stand them all up together. So this is more to keep them from getting stuck on each other. And I would tape this together nicely. And if you use a piece of paper that you stencil with that stencil, you know just what your stencil looks like. And this would remind me, not too wet a paint, not too heavy of a hand, and drier paint with a lighter hand gives me a better look. So I always, usually on the front of my file folders, I will stencil my stencil so that when I'm looking at that, I know exactly what it's going to look like when I stencil it. So, so that's what I do. I just do that. And then when you just line them all up somewhere, stick them even in a cereal box, just stand them all up. That just helps keep them separate. So there we go. That is today's project. And I think that they turned out really well. I love the way that this one turned out. And again, that's with a piece of paper. So you know how many of those you could make without having anything but just paper. So there we go. Thank you very much for stopping by. Next week, we're going to spend some of our stash, a big sum of our stash. Walmart has a sewing machine, a Brother sewing machine for $88. Now you can get that one, or you can get, any, sewing machine. If you have a sewing machine, you don't have to get anything. But we're going to set aside $100 for a sewing machine and some thread. So pick up a few threads. There'll be $12 left over to get to 100. So that's not going to be a lot of thread because it's not super cheap either. But, get some, I would definitely get a white. And you might want to get a black or a navy blue or something that's quite dark, maybe a brown. And then if they're like maybe a favorite color or something like that. So pick up a few threads so that you'll be able to sew with your sewing machine when you get it. So this, I believe, is the same sewing machine. Now this is the sewing machine that I bought. It's a Brother. Can't even get it all under here. Let's see if the other side. Nope, not any different. It's an LX3817. And it has this like pattern on it. Actually, they have 3 different patterns. And I believe that what they have now is the LX3817, but it may not be, but it looks basically just like that. I did go and look. That is the sewing machine that I purchased for the last Build Your Stash and Craft, so I'm not going to buy another one because that would be kind of silly. I will tell you, though, I am going to take that $100 and put a little bit more with it, and I'm going to try and buy one with a quilting foot on it. So, because I just want to play with that free motion quilting, so we'll see if I ever get around to that. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to spend $100 on a sewing machine and some thread for next week's Build Your Stash and Craft. And that will still leave us, we at this point in time have $146.15 in our stash. So that will leave us, once we spend that $100, let's spend $107.50. Because we have our $7.50 for next week also. So we're going to spend $107.50. So go ahead and buy some thread. Maybe buy a seam ripper, or maybe buy a pattern roller. That's like the little wheel with the little, they're not really points, but they're, So anyways, when you roll it across paper, it makes cool perforations. And it's also used to mark patterns when you're sewing. But I like it for the perforations, and it's in the sewing department. So maybe if you have a sewing machine and you want to get some fabric, you could get some new fabric, or you could go to the secondhand store and pick up some fabric, or pick up some sheets or something like that to make things out of that, you like the pattern, or just white sheets. You can dye them yourself. So we're going to spend $107.50 and buy a sewing machine so that we can use it. Now, I don't really sew. My mom always wanted to teach me to sew, and I never really wanted to do it because that was something she did. And it just didn't interest me. Now I wish I had learned because she was good at it and I'm not. But I do use it in my mixed media. And that's what I'm looking for it for. That's what I'm getting it for. But if you have one and you don't want to use it for mixed media, there are lots of people that do sewing classes on YouTube. And so you'll still have it. You'll still have put that into your stash, and, you'll have it, and other people can teach you better than I can, maybe how to sew clothing or something like that. So, so it still may be something, even if you don't want to use it for mixed media, like I probably will, or sewing together journals or whatever that may be. You may still want to use it to make something that others can teach you how to make. So, but that is it for this week. Thank you very much for stopping by. If you get a chance, please watch a commercial here or there. It really does help. Thanks to those of you who have left tips in the last few weeks. That's also very much appreciated. It does help. So thanks again. I appreciate each and every one of you. And I hope that you all have an outstanding day. Bye-bye.